Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from Child Protection Party. Glad that you could be with me today. And before I get going, I just want to thank and welcome a number of other Facebook pages which hopefully will be joining us today. And they are Australians Against Child Abuse. We thank you for being with us, and the Child Support Help. So we're welcome to our Facebook page, and thanks for being with us, and welcome to CPP TV. Eventually I was able to find the right button to press, which is rather elevating and somewhat different. So thanks for all of those that are joining with me today, because this is quite an important topic that I wish to talk about. And I just want to let people know that you can access some of our videos on our YouTube channel. And we do ask that if you are going to access our YouTube channel and make some contribution in that area, please subscribe and be a part of our YouTube. We've got many YouTubes there about a range of topics that we talk about over time, and we'd be more than welcome to have you join our YouTube page to keep up with that aspect of our work as well. Now, I wanted to have a conversation today about government's abuse of children. So one of the topics, I guess, that'll be a feature of this year will be us focusing on the continual and evolutionary abuse that seems to happen with children who are in care. And I always put a caveat around any of these conversations so that people don't misunderstand me. It is important that we acknowledge that there are parents in this world who do treat their children poorly and should have those children removed from them for whatever reason. But the point is that there are many families who either, in the first instance, shouldn't have their children removed from them, and in the second instance, at least with a little bit of work, a little bit of understanding, a little bit of compassion from those that make the decisions about removing children, those children should remain with them. And we estimate at the Child Protection Party that could be as high as 60%. 60% of children that are removed with a little bit of work will probably remain with their biological families. And one of the issues that presented itself last year, which was of particular concern to us and generally, I guess, to the community, is that there are a number of children who simply are abused in care. And I've given many Facebook feeds and YouTube feeds in relation to this issue, and it's myriad. And I just want to say that if you wish to log on and have a conversation or put forward a point of view, please do so. I'll do what I can to respond to those. I don't have Avery with me today. He's moderating this because he's got a sore throat. But I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have that you think are relevant. So one of the issues, I guess, is that departments make too many rapid decisions about what it is that should happen in regard to the care of a child. The first thing that they do, which is extremely frustrating, is they tend to label the parent as a bad parent, number one. Number two is they tend to label mothers in particular as bad parents. So a lot of parent blaming and mother blaming in particular takes place with regard to the department. The major concern for us, and one of our focuses this year, will be on the trauma that is caused when children are taken into care. The trauma is extreme. The greatest fear a child ever has is being removed from their parents. We know from divorce cases that when parents are separated, the things that kids think about the most are, what have I done to cause this disruption in the family, and why is it that my parents are choosing not to live together anymore? That disrupts psychologically a child. When a child is removed from both parents, often without adequate explanation, and often sometimes those kids are far too young to provide that explanation anyway, that is extremely damaging psychologically and emotionally. And one of the things that concerns us the most at CPP is that there's very little understanding by social workers and their colleagues about the impact that it brings about on children when they are removed from their biological parents. The other issue for us is that when a child is removed from their biological parent and placed in foster care or kinship care or residential care, often the children themselves, when they're obviously more than one child, those children, when they're separated, that causes another level of trauma for those children. Because often children build a relationship. Sometimes it seems like that they're fighting a lot of the time, but the reality is that they have a relationship which is to be cherished, which is to be nurtured. And to separate the kids is also extremely traumatic. So these are areas where the government fails to respond or fails to understand, which continues the abuse that many of these kids experience when taken into care. The other issue, and look, I could go on for ages. As I say, look at some of our videos, you'll hear me talk about this. There's issues around attachment theory, how attachment is used to continually abuse children, how judges and people in authority do not understand what attachment theory was originally designed for, or how it should be implemented. And there is a great misunderstanding as to how it can be used within the child protection system that actually can be helpful. Instead, it's used and wielded as a tool against children and against families, particularly parents, that says that this parent, for some particular reason, doesn't have an attachment with the child. That is a fallacy, but it is believed, it is sown as a myth, which many families, which many court decisions are made in relation to, and which child protection workers in particular advocate for. So the other area which is of concern, which is the continuing abuse by governments, is when children are moved from one placement to another. So on one hand, we have an issue around attachment theory. Therefore, there should be a major caregiver with whom the child is attached. And secondly, we have a range of children experience different placements because either they weren't able to build that magical attachment that is required, or their behaviour is so erratic and so unseemly that they have to move them on to another placement where the same thing happens. I was speaking to someone just last week, actually, where she was in, so she left care a few years back, but even in recent times, she had up to, so she was in care from the age of 5, I think, to 16, she left on her own accord. And she had 50 placements in that time. And of all of those placements, the only placement that had value for her was the last one that she was in. All of the others, she was abused. She was sexually assaulted, she was verbally assaulted, and she was physically assaulted. Now, why is it then, if we know that this happens, and this is, and you know, folks, this isn't about looking at historical aspects of child abuse. This isn't about looking at the mother's home in Scotland, for example, that came up in a post the other day, which I tweeted about, which happened decades ago. This is about, and it isn't about institutionalised abuse either, which was dealt with by the Royal Commission, a couple of years ago. This is a conversation we need to have about what actually is happening now. Children are being abused while in the care of the government. And the issue that I continually raise with child protection services is that, are they ever mindful? So I'll reframe that. Often we find that a parent who has been in care is they often have issues that permeate throughout their lives and into adulthood, and were never addressed when they were in care. So they didn't receive psychological assistance. They moved from placement to placement generally anyway. That the system, once they become part of that system, the abuse continues. And even though in many cases, even though there are some sexual cases, the abuse of sexual assault, and there are some abuses of physical and mental, but in many cases, the reality is that the trauma, whatever the children have received, that is either when they were with their biological parents or when they were taken into care, those issues have never been addressed. Never. So, and those kids, I know, get lost. So there are times where I've heard people tell me that they, for decades, for the time that they were in care, they had somebody initially, but they that they lost track of their social worker, or the department indicated that they just weren't interested in them anymore. The only time they ever saw a social worker when there was an issue with the placement. Hello, social worker, then they got a new placement, then that social worker vanished. There was never a consistent person working in their lives, and that was often left up to inadequate, insufficient and poorly trained foster parents and residential care workers. And when we're talking about continual abuse, we're talking about not just that, we're talking about kids that are in residential homes, you know? And some kids will tell me that they have up to 12 workers working with them during a week. Back to attachment theory. If we wish those kids to build an attachment with a primary caregiver and you've got 12 people wandering in and out of the house and changing, because they don't often stay there either, how's that building this incredible sense of attachment, which they say they must have with their parent in the first instance, but don't have while they're in care? None of that makes any sense to me. And it is the government perpetuating abuse on these kids. And there is something that we can do about it. We can continually raise the issue. One of the things that the Child Protection Party focuses on primarily, I think, is public awareness. It's about having these conversations, about letting people know that there's people like myself, Avery, and other people within the CPP who are concerned that there are things that we can do, that we need to keep the department's feet to the fire about all of the issues that occur. Last year we had an issue with the minister whereby a couple of 13-year-old kids became pregnant while in care. If those children were with a parent where that happened, a biological parent, there's a good chance the department would have got involved, maybe in some cases had removed those children. I know one particular case where that happened, where the child was sexually assaulted by a stepfather, and then that child was removed from the family, which was extremely traumatic because the mother was more than capable of looking after and with this kid, had no idea she was being sexually assaulted, she got pregnant, it all came out at that particular point in time. So who is it then that makes the department, the government, responsible for the abuse they bring about by the way that they treat these kids? There is nobody except us. So our role, my role, your role by working with CPP is to bring about effective change. The only way that we can do so is continually having these conversations. This is our public forum. This is the only way, here and YouTube and now on Twitch. These are the ways by which we get to people, to tell them what it is that we're doing that is hopefully going to make a difference. Also, we're a way by which we can hear your voice. The mantra that we have at CPP is that everybody needs to be heard, that we are your voice, that through the CPP we will be able to raise those issues that concern all of you. And it is important, therefore, that every one of you finds a way to join with us, to continue to have these conversations. There are a number of projects that we plan to do this year, which is about holding the government responsible and for the abuse that they cause the children. And one of those projects will be to interview a range of parents who have had their children removed, so that we will be able to put together a video, a documentary if you like, about their experiences and get some public exposure around that video. We'd also like to have conversations with those that have been in care and have them explain what that experience was like for them. It is one thing to hear it from me, which is through a third party because I've heard it from others. It is another thing to hear those areas of abuse that are caused while kids are in care. The problem, I guess the issue is that we know what happens when children are in care. We know what happens. The problem that we have is that no one seems to be able to understand what the solutions might be. and this has been a generational problem. Like this is not recent. This is something that we've all wrestled with, and it doesn't matter when all of this started, I guess, but it's never been resolved. There's a wonderful book written on the history of child abuse in Australia, and one of the writers in that made a statement that basically said that whatever the system was 120 years ago, not all that much has changed since then. And so you kind of got to wonder, given what we now know, why hasn't it changed? Why are kids that are in care having to go through 50 placements? Why is it that kids in care are getting pregnant? Why is it that kids in care are being abused by some foster parents in the way that they are? Why are they being sexually abused, physically abused? Why are they being emotionally abused while in foster care? How do we deal with the stigmatisation that is associated with kids who are in care? I was having a I don't know how many messages we've got from people here at the moment. We've got a few. Thanks very much, everybody. Angel and Avery's definitely online. Perry, good to see you. Emily, thank you very much for joining us. Ross, good to see you on board as well. And Ross has said that one of the things, I guess, that is important is that we could take them to court over the abuse. I often have parents say to me, we should put together a class action of some description. Or no, parents will often say, I want to take them to court. Well, go for it if you can, but actually to go to court costs many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people don't have that resource. And one of the things that I guess we continually look at, but no one's ever found a way by which it could be resolved. In other words, we haven't found a solicitor yet who has said to us, look, a number of people that have been abused while in care, why don't we do a class action? We had the class action in regard, so they had to set up the Royal Commission into Institutionalised Child Abuse, Sexual Abuse. And so just think about that for a moment. They had to set up a commission, so the government had to agree to it. There were reasonable compensation made to some of those people that came forth in regard to that commission. So we've had a commission, right? But where are all those other people that didn't have a chance to go to that commission because their issues were not about institutions or sexual abuse? Why aren't we fighting for kids who are in foster care, 50 of them, 50 placements? Why aren't we fighting for those kids? Why aren't we allowing kids who experienced intellectual and mental and psychological damage as a result of being in foster care? Why aren't we talking to parents who's had their kids removed and can't explain really why those children were removed in the first place? Where is the way by which parents can fight back against inappropriate abuse? At the moment, there is none. There's no pathway forward around any of that stuff, mainly because courts don't listen to individual cases. But would they listen? Would a court listen to a civil case taken against the government if there were enough people with a similar argument being put forward? In other words, their children, just on that basis, their children should never have been removed in the first place. How many of those parents exist out there, right? And, would there be a legal firm that would be prepared to take all of that on? I don't know. It's worth testing. And if there was a solicitor out there who's prepared to come and have a chat to us and we were able to gather 100 people or so together around that issue and take governments to court, it'd be worth doing, I think. Because the only way generally governments change the way that they behave is if there's enough public outcry about it. And one of the issues that has concerned me over many years has been that here at CPP, we're about the only place, and some of these other people that have joined us, like Australians Against Child Abuse and Child Support Help, so your organisations are invaluable in getting the word out there. But often, and we find this ourselves, so this is not a criticism of anybody else, but often people, so there's a couple of things. People need to have a voice to be able to talk about how things have affected them. That's really important. I understand that. We support that 100%. But it's more than just that. You can have a voice and you can say what you need to say, but the people that matter may not be listening and may not care. Because I don't think governments care. I don't think Rachel Sanderson really cares about what happens to the kids that are in her care. Or a chief executive, Cathy Taylor, I don't think cares one iota about what happens to the children that are in her care. Because if she did, she'd change the system in such a way that, number one, they wouldn't remove as many children. And the amount of children now being removed is increasing exponentially. It used to be about 7% a year. So if that increases, we're going to have more and more kids in care, which we are, than we've ever had before. So there are clear indicators the system isn't getting better. There are clear indicators that the government, it is government subsidised abuse that happens to most children that are in care. Government subsidised abuse. And there has to come a time where we all rage against that. I guess this is a plea for our help. We want people to put forward ideas and make suggestions that are going to make a difference. And, we've held rallies, and perhaps we need to hold more. COVID is going to probably put a halt on that for a while. But we need to put politicians under pressure. And one of the ways we can do that, or what we believe we can do that, is to get people that represent the Child Protection Party into positions of power. So becoming a member of the Child Protection Party is important. Finding ways to help us and work with us is extremely important. To stand, put your hand up and stand as a candidate in your state, either through your state election or federally, is important. To have this party registered in every state and territory in Australia as a political party is vital. To be registered nationally, which we are at the moment, is important. We're registered here in South Australia. That is important. But to do this nationally and to build up a national campaign fighting for kids in the way that we do is also extremely important. And I just want to mention that Child Protection Party, even though the focus today is around child protection in particular, there are a range of areas that impact kids, and I've talked about them many, many times, and we do not ignore them one iota. Improving educational outcomes for kids, making sure that kids with any form of intellectual, physical, mental challenges are met, that kids from low socioeconomic backgrounds are given the same opportunities as kids in wealthier backgrounds. These are important issues for us, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. To make sure that the world that we as adults are leaving our kids is a better world, that's really important to us as well. So those things are never forgotten. It's just that today we're talking specifically about child protection per se. So if you can become a part of Child Protection Party, just go to Child Protection Party, childprotection.party /join. And I'm sure if Avery's watching this at the moment, Avery, you just put up the information relevant to that and become a part of what we're about. So Crystal's posted, Glenn, glad to see you, Glenn. There's some new names here. So I'm pleased to see that some people have logged in who haven't necessarily contacted us before. The fight to change child protection systems is a long one. It's been going on for years. There has never been a political party with a focus on looking after the well-being of kids. Never. This is what CP is about. There is not another CPP anywhere else in the world. People overseas hear and see what we're doing and they're amazed at what we're doing because it is unique. Why isn't it that we care about kids? Why don't we care? Look, there are other parties out there that do other great things. Animal Welfare League, whatever it might be. There are other great parties. Why is it, though, that most of the time they don't care about the well-being of children, no matter who they are? They don't. They don't make it a focus. They don't make sure that whatever policies they develop are filtered through the eyes of children so that we can think about how that's going to be for these children when they become adults. People don't think about this at all, except here at CPP. So it is really important that as many of you as possible join us, become a part of this movement so that we can effectively make changes. So that, people will say to me, I never expected my children to be removed from me. There was one fight I had with my partner and then suddenly someone had notified, department moved in, they removed my kids. They didn't give me a chance to sort out that relationship and what was happening, but they wanted me to leave him. It was just one fight. I've had another client who the department insists their partner was a violent and abusive man, and she vows and declares that in her relationship with him he was not, but they don't want to accept that. And there are 1,000 of those similar stories that I've heard over the years, which disturb me because they're not alone. There are many of them. There are thousands of those stories where a notification gets made, the department step in. And then there are the other stories. Like, I was working with one woman, fabulous woman, and there were many issues in which there was drug abuse, violence, bikie gangs, the whole bit. During that period of her life, the department didn't get involved at all. We worked out there were 20 notifications, well, no, more than that, more than 20 notifications in relation, and the department didn't get involved. At the end, they did, and they should have, right? And then she changed her life dramatically from that point on. Dramatically. Unbelievable change. And then didn't get the kids returned to her at all, and is still fighting to this day, some 8 years later, to get these kids returned. And the first instance one of the first cases I ever worked with, that woman, so that's over 10 years ago, she just had her 14-year-old child returned to her because this child was so damaged while in care. And then the mum has to come in and sort out all the emotional and psychological damage that was done to this child while she was in care. And I told the social worker at the time, there is no reason why you need to remove this kid from this mother. None at all. And there weren't. Even though housing initially was an issue and her relationship with her partner was. They were managed, they were dealt with. At the time they decided to go for a GOM18, there was no reason to remove this child. The point I'm making is that we're aware that there are many children who could have been saved. Thousands and thousands of children who could have been saved. But because of crappy social work standards, of people not being able to make decisions that are actually in the best interest of the child, but are more about their interest in making sure that they're not accountable for whatever might happen down the track. And that there are things, I think, we have to continue fighting for these parents and these kids. It is imperative. without us, where else do you go? You can go to Facebook pages and you can let off steam, but which are important. But if you want to make significant change, it's through legislation. It's through us having conversations with those people that make those decisions. That's what's important. It's about keeping the department accountable for what it is they do that makes the difference, right? And we are your voice, Child Protection Party. So I just want to thank all of those people that have joined us today, and those people on Facebook and those people on YouTube. Thanks very much for being a part of us. And if you're new to Child Protection Party, then we are grateful that you've chose to be a part of this particular movement to ensure that children are safe. So thanks everybody, and for those of you that are around Australia that are battling this COVID thing, we just hope that all of you continue to remain safe. Take care. See you later, everybody. Bye.